The fractal formations described in the Gaia mythos are actual physical phenomena that occur spontaneously when an eon, a mass-free, high-porosity current of stellar plasma, pours into the dense fields of elementary matter. At first, these fractal seahorses seem to be inanimate structures, rigid and almost crystalline in nature. But by the very fact that Sophia beholds them, they become animated. In the second stage of the unfoldment, the Eon Sophia descends to empower her fallen members by giving them spirit or breath. Thus, the tensile forms morph from semi-rigid seahorses into rounded fetal forms with tails. But the tails, it seems, keep falling off and turning into other embryos. By this bizarre process of self-repeating generation, the neonate horde of the Archons emerges. After the initial formation of the embryonic Archon types, a second variant of shadow body arises, with distinct characteristics of its own. Described as an arrogant beast resembling a lion, and a serpentine body with a lion-like face. Thus, there are two distinct types of Archons, a fetal or embryonic type, and a draconic or reptilian type. While the neonate Archons are inert, their forms arrested at a premature stage of development. The reptilian leader is aggressive, territorial, and charged with demonic powers. For one thing, he is a formidable shapeshifter. Yaldabaoth had a multitude of faces, more than all of them, so that he could put a face before all of them, according to his desire. He shared his fire with them, therefore he became lord over them. Because of power of the glory he possessed of his mother's light, he called himself God, and he did not obey the place where from he came. The archontic nature is not capable of development. Due to the manner of their generation, Archons have no innate intentionality. Theirs is an alien dreaming, set apart from the biosphere, the intelligent life field of Gaia. The concept of a god who is both void of willpower and insane is apparently unique to Gnosticism. A telling detail is the fact that the chief Archon moves away from the places where he arose, indicating a key concern of Gnostics: the boundary-violating tendencies of the Archons. The Draconic Archon is said to be blind, so he does not see either the Pleroma or Sophia. Blindness of the spiritual world characterizes the Archons. Understanding the blindness of the Archons is crucially important to our detection of how they can affect humanity. The embryonic type remains self-absorbed but reacts to the aggression of the other type. The reptilian form does appear to be fractally repeated in the tail structure of the embryonic type, as if the tail broke off and became an entity of its own, rather than another embryo. The element of fear figures largely in the behavior of the Archons and their effect on humanity. The Archons wish to keep humankind under the constraint of fear and worry. Archons use fear as a psychological weapon. Gnostics taught that Nous, the spiritual intelligence endowed in humanity, could be blocked by the Archons. This occurs through archontic intrusion, involving a kind of subliminal invasion at the level of thought and language, mental syntax. But Nous could be reinforced through accessing the power of Kundalini, an ecstatic current that normally rests dormant in the human body. The erotic strategy is the most important means used by the pneumatics to save the lost light. Pneumatics is the Gnostic term for humans who pursue the path of psychosomatic illumination. Pneuma, spiritual force, is developed by cultivation of Nous, higher intelligence. But the Archons present a blind field of resistance to this process. In short, they rely on humans remaining ignorant of their inherent spiritual potential. When Kundalini is raised from its dormant state, higher intelligence blossoms, and there are other effects as well. Gnostic sects, such as the Ophites, practiced the communal raising of Kundalini to produce a protective envelope against archontic intrusion. In effect, they held Kundalini, the sexual spiritual energy locked in the body structure, to be the main instrument of defense against the Archons. Judas said, "Behold, the authorities, Archons, dwell above us, so it is they who will rule over us." The Savior said, "It is you who will rule over them, but only when you rid yourselves of jealousy and take on the protection of the light and enter the Nymphion, bridal chamber." The Savior teacher is emphatic that we have power over the Archons, but he also makes it clear that some human failings impede the use of our power. Gnostics considered envy to be the signature of the Archons, as well as the key human failing that makes us vulnerable to their intrusion. The protection of the light comes through activated Kundalini, often described as a lightning-like tide of electrified light that pours through the body. Nymphion is a code word for the ambient cell of psychophysical protection generated by high levels of Kundalini. The Kundalini serpent is displayed in Egyptian sacred art by a standing cobra, or a pair of cobras, sometimes wound on a staff, and by the uraeus, the cobra headdress of divine empowerment. The ceremonial braid on the side of Horus's head was yet another indication of the serpent power. The pharaonic braid, traditionally worn on the right side of the head, visually repeats the form of the spermatic cobras. The sacred iconography carries explicit but highly occult knowledge that Horus is the child whose right brain cerebral functions are heightened by the serpent power. Gnostic seers discerned the Archon's attempt to inseminate Eve, to interfere in the genetics of the human species. But they also observed that the attempt was a failure. The metamorphosis of Eve into a tree recalls the Greek myth of Daphne, who turned into a laurel. This parallel shows that Gnostic cosmo mythology was not a fluke, but a system of visionary knowledge. For Gnostics, the visions they beheld in altered states were empirically true and could be tested. By doing so, they were able to develop extraordinary insight into the superhuman worlds, the activities of the gods, the relation of humanity to alien species, and the long-term experience of the human species. The above scenario describes how the Archons failed to capture Eve, yet they somehow engage her shadow, a mere reflection. This implies that although the Archons cannot access our genetic structure, they may affect or distort our image of woman, of the feminine, and in that sense, they really can succeed in defiling Eve. They may distort our sense of our own genetic makeup.